Recently at SpaceCom 2022, I had an opportunity to briefly interview the folks over at Magdrive and what they're talking about in terms of next generation propulsion, but I really wanted to get more in depth as to what their long-term plans were and what made their type of propulsion better than, say, ion drives and other types of next generation propulsion that's coming up. And what I discovered was nothing less than astounding. We're talking about propulsion that not only is going to get us to Mars more efficiently and other sorts of things that I discuss on this channel, but also to protect us from the inevitability of a disaster like the Kessler syndrome in low Earth orbit. And if you think that I'm exaggerating, well, we've got our interview coming up that's going to open a lot of eyes. Okay guys, I am here at Magdrive and we are getting ready to talk about some next generation propulsion, a favorite topic of mine here on this channel. And gentlemen, if you'd please be so kind as to introduce yourselves.
I'm Mark Stokes, I'm co-founder and CEO of Magdrive. I take care of everything that's non-technical, those long-term strategy, the finance, operations, but I still love being in the lab. I still love seeing all the technical work being done. So that's exactly where I feel at home still.
Hello, I'm Dr. Thomas Clayson, CTO and co-founder, so I do the other half of stuff, so basically manage the technical development. Well, now we've got such an excellent technical team, I don't get to spend as much time in the lab as I like.
Well, we had an opportunity to briefly talk at SpaceCom. Viewers, if you have not watched that video, shame on you. You really need to check into all the amazing things that are happening here in the UK. But that having been said, we did a brief overview of what your propulsion system does. Could we go into a little bit more detail as to the entire process and why this is so much better than chemical propulsion?
So, as you may know, in the industry, you've got two options for moving around in space with a satellite. Chemical systems gives you a lot of thrust, but very inefficiently. With electric systems, you get that really high efficiency, but you get very, very low thrust. What we're building with high power electric plasma is still electric propulsion. It's very efficient, but it's 100 times more thrust than any other electric propulsion system that's out there. What that means is that electric propulsion can start doing the heavy lifting for space that until now was only available to chemical propulsion. So electric systems can now be able to do, large-scale constellation management, satellite rendezvous for satellite servicing in space, all to manufacturing and assembly, really unlocking entirely new business models and mission types.
So, how is this an improvement over the old ion thrusters that a lot of satellites and various kinds of space probes use? How does it get better than that?
Yeah, so all of these systems are basically ejecting a plasma out of the back, and you send the plasma one way, you go the other way. This difference with our system is that we eject far more plasma per second, and we're able to do that due to two things. Firstly, our unique plasma injector, which allows us to just pump more plasma through a small chamber, and secondly, advances in electronics we've seen over the last couple of decades, which allow us to massively increase the power we can send through our system in one go.
So that being the case, what do you have? What's going to be your first experiment, proof of concept, whatever that you send out into space? What do you have coming out right now?
So it's going up end of the year. We have our first mission, which is extremely important for us. It's also extremely rapid, less than 2 years from our investment to actually having hardware in space. This is a test of our power system. It's a half-U, a 500 gram, 1 pound, I guess, for your American viewers.
About that, yeah.
Payload, which is flying on board a hosted spacecraft, launching on the SpaceX Transporter 6 mission towards the end of the year.
So a ride share with SpaceX, did you find that was your best cost-effective option to ride share with them as opposed to, flying out on one of the, like a Rocket Lab or Virgin Orbit or something like that?
That decision was left to the guys building the hosted payload itself. So that's in Durasat in Bulgaria. And we the benefit of working with them is we leave those kind of decisions to them, essentially. So they handle that entire area of launch. We just need to make sure that we can integrate with them, and then it's taken out of our hands, which is fantastic because we want to work on the technology, we want to work on integration. It's a lot of extra time and energy to actually talk to the launch company itself and try to figure out their cadence and their availability. That's what they excel at as well.
Is it, do you know if it's your philosophy to be launch provider agnostic, or are you going to stick with SpaceX?
So at the end of the day, what we are doing is we're a component provider. So it will be satellite operators which will buy our system. So if you are, most satellite operators or companies which prime space missions will buy components from different companies. They'll buy solar panels from one company, computer from another, propulsion from another. At the end of the day, if it's not propulsion, we're not interested. We just want to sell them propulsion systems, and they will pick the launch provider. What we want to do, though, is we want to make our propulsion system as agnostic to as many different satellite buses as possible. We're undergoing a big shift in the space industry at the moment. We've seen it already at the very small CubeSat scale, and it's expanding to the rest of the industry, where we're moving away from this bespoke system where things would be designed for a big NASA mission or an ESA mission. And we're now moving towards more standardized hardware, which can be used by many different spacecraft, and standardized spacecraft, which can do multiple different functions or form part of a larger network, one of these constellations.
We really want to ride that wave of this standardization of hardware. Like Tom said, a lot of bespoke work goes into the way companies currently buy a propulsion system. And it takes a hell of a long time and a hell of a lot of money. What we want to be doing is learning all the lessons from other components and the automotive industry, for example, where we can build standardized hardware, we can control it through software instead, which means that we can provide a system which the customer knows is going to work for them every single time with a big thrust range, different profiles, and they know exactly what they're buying every single time.
So do you foresee, for example, I don't know if Starlink uses, chemical reaction control systems, and if so, is that a perfect customer for you in order to do their avoidance maneuvers? Well, they would be. As a large constellation, that's exactly where we want to be. We want to be that ubiquitous choice for large constellation management, especially with how congested low Earth orbit's going to get. Some people are saying that avoidance maneuvers are going to go from twice yearly to every week. At that point, your chemical thrusters, they're going to last 6 months, and then your satellite is junk. It's junk you can talk to, but it's junk. So that's the ideal market for us. We want to be able to enable that really long lifetime in low Earth orbit, doing all those maneuvers. The problem with Starlink, which is the way SpaceX work, is they vertically integrate everything. So they're always going to make their own stuff. But other big constellation makers, they're ideal customers as well. Now help me out again, because I'm ignorant about a lot of these things. Is Starlink a Chemical RCS?
So Starlink is using a Krypton Hall effect thruster, I believe, as their primary drive. For their RCS, I don't think they have active RCS thrusters. They're it's a small spacecraft. It's less than 200 kilos, I think. I think they're just using combinations of torque wheels. I could be completely wrong about that.
Yeah. They wouldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there is also that, right? I don't know. They could well have an additional warm gas thruster for collision avoidance. I couldn't say.
Yeah, and then of course the version 2 coming out really soon is substantially larger than the first one, which sounds like the problem's going to get worse. So I mean, it sounds like what you're telling me, not to be too alarmist here, but what you're telling me is that if we don't have, satellites with enormous amounts of ISP rather, then we're going to be running into serious problems with unguided missiles, in the thousands flying around up there. I mean, is that kind of where we're headed if we don't do something about it?
Not thousands, millions. We're basically sleepwalking into a bit of a disaster with space. We have thousands of spacecraft which have been launched already, but by the middle of the decade, humanity wants to launch anywhere from 9,000 up to 20,000 spacecraft per year. The numbers are going bonkers. They're going astronomical. And that is going to require, as Mark said, going from doing 1 or 2 collision avoidance maneuvers a year to doing 1 a week. Now, in that case, chemical propulsion will run out of fuel too quickly. If you run out of fuel within a few months, your spacecraft is effectively dead, and will eventually fall out of orbit and become a potential hazard for other spacecraft. What we're providing is an alternative which is still able to do those agile avoidance maneuvers that chemical can do, but at a 10-fold improvement in the specific impulse. And that allows you to effectively either send your spacecraft 10 times further into space or have it up there for 10 times longer.
So you're absolutely right when you say we need greater specific impulse, greater efficiency. That already exists with electric propulsion systems. The problem is that it's so low thrust.
Yeah.
At that level of thrust is so low, you can't respond to an incoming satellite collision. And by the time you're starting to respond to it, you're already moving into the path of something else, and you need to move again. It doesn't have the maneuverability anywhere near what's needed for it.
So can you scale this up? I mean, at least in your current, perfect world scenarios, can you scale this thing up to, say, an ISS level, collision avoidance or orbital reef, all of these other space stations that are coming out? You can help with that too?
Absolutely. So this is the first model we're building, and the next model is something we've already started work on. It's the imaginatively named Super Magdrive, and everything about this technology just scales. We use more power, we ionize more propellant, and we control it with stronger magnetic fields. It's a much larger system, but it means that we can deploy tens of newtons of thrust, but importantly we can do it at the same high efficiency, and that is a game changer for large-scale orbital assembly, orbital manufacturing, but also for keeping really large structures and their station keeping.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're at an interesting time in space. People are looking towards the moon again, not just with Artemis and SLS, but with a commercial lens. And people are looking towards asteroids. These are very demanding propulsion environments, and in addition, we have these new super heavy lifters coming online, like SLS, like Starship and New Glenn. So the size of spacecraft is going to get bigger again. And these large spacecraft operating in the lunar environment, going out to asteroids, they need a workhorse. And that's what we want the Magdrive to be, or the Super Magdrive.
Talking about the asteroids is actually really, really interesting because we use a metal propellant. Now, metal is super abundant in space. You've got satellites out there which are junk, and they could be recycled. The main thing we're going to be mining on asteroids is metal. Now, it's an engineering challenge, sure, but what it means is that our propellant exists in space, which means we get to close the loop on the entire concept of a space economy. The alternative, which is everyone else's propellant, that needs to be brought from Earth every single time. It's like building a new train every time you leave the station, and you can't build railroads that way.
Right, exactly. Let's go a little bit more into the technical side. You've talked about metallic-based plasma. Now, I mean, generally in the past, ionized plasma, we go with things more traditional, krypton, xenon. I mean, we're talking gaseous plasma. How do you make that jump to metallic plasma? And again, where's the advantage there?
Yeah, so the way we do that is quite different to how a Hall effect thruster or an ion thruster works. Our system is like an advanced pulse plasma thruster. We have an array of capacitors which we charge to a very high voltage, and then we discharge those extremely rapidly. In less than a millionth of a second. That generates an extremely high current, high voltage pulse in the megawatts regime, and we use that to vaporize and ionize a very, very tiny amount of metal. And that produces like a little plasma bullet which is accelerated through our magnetic chamber. And we do that at a high rep rate, so we get hundreds of these plasma bullets shot every second, which impart momentum onto the spacecraft. The advantages of a solid metal propellant are numerous. Firstly, it's available in space, which is awesome for the future, but in the more immediate term, it's a completely inert, completely safe, solid propellant, which doesn't require any heavy cryogenic storage. It doesn't require any heavy pressurized storage. It doesn't need to be filled at the launch site, reducing the OPEX expenditure massively. We will be delivering propulsion systems fully fueled to the end customer, and they can sit on shelves for years. And once you're in space, or during launch and in space, metals are really quite dense, so you can store quite a lot of propellant in a very small volume, which is pretty handy.
Yeah, this is revolutionary. I mean, really, it's with all the reading that I've done about this, it doesn't even, it's astonishing to think that it's possible. Okay, so I mean, again, not to sound alarmist, but it almost seems like if we don't, it's not like next generation propulsion is, ooh, wouldn't that be cool so we can get from place to place faster. It's more like if we want to avoid Kessler syndrome, we need this. Is that kind of what you're telling me? Because I mean, it's how I'm hearing it.
Yeah, absolutely. The industry is at a bit of a crossroads. A lot of people are waiting for a regulatory solution to this.
That's not happening.
They're waiting for someone to regulate who can go to which places in LEO and when they can go and how long they can be there. But the reality of it is that it's super hard to police. And what kind of, how are you going to, sanction certain companies that do or don't play ball with that? Then you've got, in reality, you can't really talk to the Chinese government and what regulations they're doing in space. So this regulatory framework that's a sort of absolute moonshot idea that no one even knows how to put in place. The alternative is a technological solution that allows satellites to accomplish those avoidance maneuvers, allows them to deorbit as well, and really importantly, do it without sacrificing mission lifetime. Because there are some space agencies that are really pushing the idea of making it mandatory to deorbit your satellite at the end of its lifetime.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The industry would love to do that because they also still want to be space companies in the future. They'd love to do that. But right now, there's no propulsion system that lets them do that and not slash their satellite lifetime in half.
Right. Wow. Okay, let's take this even further into the future then. I do a great deal of talking about things like nuclear thermal, nuclear electric, that sort of thing. It sounds like what your system requires is a great deal of energy. So if I have fission or perhaps in the future fusion, being poured into this, can we scale this thing up to human transportation?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that is eventually where we want to go. We're starting with the Magdrive Nano for the nanosat class spacecraft because that's where that's where the market is growing fastest and it's where we're able to raise significant investment. But as we do transition to those larger spacecraft launched on those heavy, super heavy lifters, which might be automated, might have humans involved, we're going to need a larger propulsion system. And as you get larger and larger, solar panels and battery storage become a little less attractive. And things like nuclear power solutions, which are being developed and are being developed for late in the decade, next decade, are going to need a scalable, high-power electric propulsion solution. And we are by far the best solution for that. We're going to be the system which is able to take the most amount of power, and we're also scalable. We're able to offer solutions across the entire range, all the way from like a small RCS thruster on small spacecraft up to the main drive of some interplanetary tug.
Okay, so if we're talking interplanetary, then I don't know how much you want to talk numbers here, but how much ISP do you think you can get on a sizable, vessel versus the ISP on, say, Raptor 2? They're looking 350 seconds. What can you do if you had a nuclear power plant running into this?
I mean, so we're talking about in-space propulsion, and the ISPs we're dealing with are order of magnitude improvements. We're talking about 2,000 seconds being our low option and going up to 4,000 or 5,000 seconds. Those are the sorts of numbers that you can achieve with electric propulsion and things like Hall effect thrusters. But unlike other electric propulsion, we also offer that high level of thrust that gives you that high maneuverability.
So 2,000 seconds versus 350, 400. Because when we talk about nuclear thermal, they're talking 900 to 1,000. So are we talking double the performance of a nuclear thermal thruster? Could we get to Mars in 45 days instead of 90 with something like this?
The trade-off is kind of the other way around. If you have a higher ISP, it means that you are much, much more efficient with your propellant. So you need a lot less propellant, and that means that you can move larger cargo, and you can go much further. So you could go to Jupiter, say. But it does take a little bit longer because you have to generate that power, and that's where the nuclear reactor comes into our future plans, because that generates sufficient power that we can do that transfer still quickly because we have the power to deliver it.
So now the question there is not about how quickly you can get to Mars, but it's how many trips you can make. Right.
Yeah.
With just the one spacecraft,
and how much you can take with you.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to be filling up like early canal boats, for example, in the industrial age. The fact that they move super slow No one was bothered about that because you can pack so much on them.
Right.
That's what the early sort of freight to Mars is going to look like. Even if it takes that 90 days, the fact that you'll be able to put so much more on it, that's going to create a very different sort of economic viability to it, that's what it's going to come down to.
Right.
The maybe the best way to think about it is like the geostationary spacecraft. Currently existing geostationary spacecraft, and in particular the older ones, use chemical thrusters to get out there. They weighed about 5 tons on launch, but they only delivered about a single ton of payload to GSO because they just use so much fuel to get there. But with an electric propulsion system, you can deliver. You know, if your launch mass is initially 5 tons, you might be able to deliver 4 or so tons up to GSO because you have that massive reduction. It's literally a 10-fold reduction in the amount of propellant you require.
So once again, and I know it sounds like perhaps people tend to get obsessed with speed, especially perhaps somebody obsessed with race cars and things like that. But of course, also in terms of minimizing the amount of time in microgravity, minimizing the amount of time you could potentially be exposed to a coronal mass ejection, that sort of thing. Getting to Mars faster for humans anyway is an important thing. Do you feel that this is a better solution even on that front than perhaps nuclear thermal? Because of course nuclear thermal, the magic number they keep talking about is about 90 days or so. Do you think that this could deliver the same thing, or is this mostly to deliver more payload in the same amount of time as a chemical thruster?
Actually, I think the argument still holds up. If you're transporting people, you're going to have really good radiation protection on that spacecraft, whether you're up there for 90 days or whether you're up there for 300 days. It's got to be just as good. You're going to run into a lot more sort of radiation out there than you're going to get any kind of coronal discharge that really messes you up. So the spacecraft design, in terms of human cargo, I don't see being so drastically different.
All right.
You can definitely build a fast delivery system with the Magdrive. I mean, that's something we could do. I mean, the issue becomes how much power you have available. That's the limiting factor at the end of the day. And hey, if you can take a lot more stuff with you, you can take an extra nuclear reactor. So that lets you get there a bit.
Yeah.
Gives you more power, right?
Yeah, we talk about, with the Magdrive Nano that we're building, we talk about, an array, maybe a 2x2, 3x3. Maybe we'll do an array of
Super Magdrives.
Super duper Magdrives.
The Mega Magdrive.
Yeah, I've cursed it now. We're going to use that name.
Yep.
So this is one of the more you have of them, the better. Is that you're going to have clusters of these things?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. However, what we're looking at with the next model, for the Super Magdrive compared to the Magdrive Nano, is that one could weigh up to 50 kilograms. However, if you compare that to 50 kilograms worth of Magdrive Nano, it is much more efficient. So we reach a point where having an array, it makes no sense to have an array that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Instead, anyone with 2 brain cells would say, yeah, we're going to use a Super Magdrive instead.
Great. Is there anything you would like to add to the discussion, or anything else you would like people to know about your technology?
I don't know. Look out for us. We're expanding fast. We're going incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that real quick, because you just moved into this space that I'm sitting in here with. How many employees again that you have?
We're 11 at the moment.
11 at the moment, in a year and a half or so, and now you're already moving into a new facility. You have a clean room in this building. So where are you headed here in terms of your company growth?
Really, with company growth, we want to accelerate and de-risk the Magdrive Nano as much as possible, while still working on the Super Magdrive. We've been doing some preliminary work on it already, and the real benefit there is we get some real insights into how we can better make the Magdrive Nano from doing that kind of work. So we're looking into ways to get started on that Super Magdrive earlier. Having that newer, bigger lab is going to really help with that capability. And the sooner we can get that done, the sooner we can also start, and we kind of have started looking into it, using the nuclear fission devices for the next version of the Magdrive, and that all feeds down to how much we can de-risk, how much we can accelerate our current progress.
Nuclear electric propulsion, talking about it already. That's exciting stuff. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for the time you gave me today. You've given us a lot of really exciting stuff to think about, and until we graduate to a new level of propulsion, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.